Welcome to the European Innovation Council podcast series, where we discuss some of the hot topics surrounding game-changing deep tech innovation. What's hot today is the recently published EIC work programme for 2025. And here to tell us more is Keith Sequeira, head of the EIC policy unit in the European Commission. Welcome to you, Keith. Before we jump right into the detail of the work programme, can you tell us a bit about what the recently published Dragy Report might mean for the EIC?
So thanks, and it's a pleasure to be here with you, Aoife. So the Draghi Report has been, I think, very influential for European policy making about really putting the emphasis for economic policy on innovation and particularly disruptive innovation. And some of the statistics here are very stark. We know that the overall R&D expenditure in the European Union is only about 2/3 of the level that it is, for example, in the United States. But if we look then at venture capital, which is really critical for disruptive innovation, for scaling companies, and it's exposed in the Draghi Report, we can see that the amount invested in Europe is only 1/5 the level of the United States. So there's a huge gap there, and Draghi puts the finger that this is really something that should be the focus of attention. So I think it's a very important piece of context and really putting the European Innovation Council and what we're doing in the spotlight.
Thanks, Keith. Lots to look forward to for European innovators. And on a similar note, startups have very clearly been pushed up the EU agenda with the first ever Commissioner for Startups, Research and Innovation. How might this enhanced focus boost support for European innovators?
Yes, I think having the first ever European Commissioner for Startups is already a big change. Of course, we have to wait and see. The new Commission has not started yet. We are waiting to see on the exact date that they will take office. But already we can see there's a lot of ambition and a lot of ideas for new initiatives. So, for example, there is a task for the new Commissioner for Startups to develop a strategy for startups and scale-ups. Also to develop an Innovation Act to really put in place the regulatory framework for startups and innovation. There's also been the commitment also by President von der Leyen to expand the European Innovation Council. And then there's various other initiatives, such as a new company statute that we hope will be very relevant for startups and avoid some of these problems as they scale to different markets across Europe, and reforms to the Capital Markets Union to allow more institutional investment into venture capital and startups. So we see a big focus in the new Commission around startups, and we're very happy that there will be the first ever Commissioner for Startups, we hope, starting very soon.
Very clear. Thank you, Keith. And now let's revert to what we have available now for European innovators. A novelty of this EIC work programme is the equity-only Strategic Technologies for Europe platform scale-up call. Can you tell us more about this initiative?
Yes, so this has been a big development and a big novelty of the work programme, which defines how we will use the budget for 2025. It actually started about a year ago with a discussion in the EIC board, which is where we get our advice and our intelligence about what we need to focus on. And the board members were telling us that there is a big gap for companies as they try to scale up and look for larger investments. And this was happening already with a number of the companies that we have supported in the EIC and through the EIC fund. And when we looked at the data, we saw that this was very clearly the case. We saw that with the comparisons with the US and others, once you get to larger investments, say above 50 million euros, then there's far less availability in Europe. And what is also striking is that for these larger investments, they are very much dominated by non-European investors. So we thought it was very important to do something about this. And the Commission put forward a new piece of legislation called the STEP legislation. So STEP sounds for Strategic Technologies for Europe platform. And this legislation changed two things for the European Innovation Council. Firstly, to allow us to invest more than the 50 million euros that we have currently been doing. And secondly, to allow us to provide support as equity only, so without any requirements for a eligible grant or eligible previous support. So we have designed with the EIC board a new call. It has 300 million euros in 2025, and we will be targeting this at companies in the strategic areas that could be digital, could be clean tech, could be biotech, that have these large capital needs, but the technologies remain high risk. So we will be offering investments of 10 million to up to 30 million euros. We hope that these will allow companies to raise financing rounds of 50 million euros, 100 million euros, 150 million euros or more. And we will also be asking companies to come with a pre-investor so that we know that there is some market traction for these companies. So if I can give you an example, we would be looking for a company that is maybe trying to raise a financing round of 100 million euros. They would seek 20 million euros from the European Innovation Council. They would come with an investor that already has an intention to finance them with 20 million euros. And then together with the company, we would be aiming to raise the additional 60 million euros to finalize the round. And we have now increasingly good relationships, collaboration with a whole network of investors that allow us to really support companies in these larger financing rounds. So it's very important for Europe. It's really addressing one of the key weaknesses of Europe that Mr. Draghi and others have identified, larger investments in these critical companies that we think will be critical for the future of Europe.
Thank you, Keith. And now for a very important question. What will the EIC be doing next year to support underrepresented groups such as women innovators and innovators from less developed European innovation ecosystems?
So this has been an area of big attention, particularly for the EIC board. We have been tracking very carefully the number of women-led companies. So we define these as companies that have a female CEO. That's about 20%, or they may also have a chief technology officer or chief scientific officer, which we believe are key posts being female. And if we take this measurement, it's about 40%. So this is better than the overall deep tech market, but we still think it's not good enough. So there's a few new things that we are starting. We are starting a gender innovation index. So we actually have comparable data about female participation, whether it's as founders of companies or the investment or the VC or the LPs that support investors. We will be supporting from the EIC the Women Tech EU scheme, which is the scheme for early stage female founders in deep tech. And we'll be trying to bring this as a pipeline for the EIC. So there's a number of things there. And then we're also looking at some regions, countries in Europe that we believe have not been participating enough in the European Innovation Council, particularly in Central Eastern Europe. We have a number of outreach events. We're going to these countries to talk about the EIC, to meet the companies. But we're also starting a new scheme, which we're calling the EIC Pre-Accelerator. And this is to help companies in these countries, which are called the widening countries under Horizon Europe, with a support at earlier stage. So when they have the proof of concept, but they need to develop the business, they need to develop their investment readiness, they need to mature the technologies to be competitive for the EIC Accelerator. So we are providing our business acceleration services to support these companies, and the call to fund these companies will be launched in early 2025. So we hope with these measures we can really move the needle in terms of greater female participation. We know there's a lot of fantastic female founders out there, supporting them earlier stage, but also really supporting those companies in less developed ecosystems to become European, if not global champions.
Fantastic, Keith. Thank you. Great to hear that there's a lot going on in these areas. And now a question on the main programs of the EIC, the Pathfinder, Transition and Accelerator. Can you remind us, Keith, who are these programs aiming to support? And perhaps give us an idea of the budget for each in 2025.
Yes, so we tried to cover all of the different what we call the technology readiness levels. So from very early stage research right through to growth companies. And we structure this in three main funding programs. So we have our Pathfinder program. This is for early stage research. And the idea really is to find where are the new technologies coming from the research base. So this is technology readiness level, early stage up to proof of concept. It's mostly collaborative projects. We will fund projects between 3 and 4 million euros, and most of that is open, but we have a number of challenges as well. Then moving on, we have our transition funding scheme, which is to take a proof of concept and see how to turn that into a viable commercial prospect or business plan. So that's developing the business side, what is the market for this technology, how to mature the technology and test it in that particular application area. And there we give grants of up to 2.5 million euros. That can be a single startup, a single small company, or a single research team, for example, that would like to launch a spin-out company. But it can also be small consortia, maximum 5, that can involve corporates as well as the research and SMEs. And then finally, we have our Accelerator scheme, which is for startups, for small companies, and that provides grants of up to 2.5 million euros and equity support to invest in the companies. And to give you an idea of the budgets, the Pathfinder scheme, we have over 250 million euros, I think 262 to be precise. In the transition, we have close to 100 million euros. And in the Accelerator, we have over 600 million euros, which is both for the grant and for the equity. But for then the larger investments, as I was mentioning, we now have the new step call, which will give larger investments above 10 million. And there we have 300 million, as I mentioned before. So with this, we think there's very exciting opportunities right across the spectrum from early stage research to the transition into companies and scaling and growing those companies.
Very clear, Keith. And as a follow-up to that, is it possible to give an idea of how many innovative deep tech projects and companies the EIC is expecting to support next year?
Yeah, so if we look at the numbers, in the Pathfinder scheme, we have a bit over 250 million euros. And there we would be looking at projects of 3 to 4 million euros. So we would be aiming to support around 80 projects, 80, 90 projects, mostly collaborative projects for these breakthrough technologies from the research base. In the transition, we have a little bit under 100 million, and therefore with a maximum of 2.5 million, we'd be supporting about 40 projects to really take these exciting technologies to the business readiness level. And then for the Accelerator, with a bit over 600 million euros, we would be aiming probably around 100, 120 companies. There it depends on what the amount that will go for the investments that can go from 500,000 euros to 10 million euros. But I would say we'd be looking for at least 100 of Europe's most exciting startups. And then finally, for the new step call with 300 million euros, we would think there that we would be aiming to support around 15 of these later stage companies in very strategic areas. And we plan to continue that in 26 and 27. So over this time period, maybe 50 very exciting companies for the future of Europe.
Excellent, Keith. And finally, the EIC Challenge calls, which are designed to directly support major EU priorities. What can we expect from those in the coming year?
So I think it's important for listeners to know that the majority of funding is for what we call open calls. So in these calls, you can apply for any technology And in the Accelerator, you can apply any time from anywhere in Europe across all of these technologies. So this is very open, and we support the best ideas that come through these open calls. But each year we define a number of areas where we reserve funding for specific priorities. And in 2025, we have 4 of these challenges in the Pathfinder and 5 in the Accelerator. Now, in the Pathfinder, these are very much driven by our in-house EIC program managers. And this is very much visions that they have set in some emerging areas of technology. So if I can give you an example, there is a challenge this year on collectives of autonomous robots. So this is not only robots being autonomous, but how do they work together? It's very important scientific problems, but we think also a big innovation potential. And then if we move to the Accelerator, we have 5 challenges, each of these around 50 million euros, so to support maybe 8 or 10 companies, exciting startups. And again, we have a range of different areas here. We have generative AI, looking also at the applications of generative AI, but we also have our first challenge that we've ever had in the area of transport, to look at some of the disruptive technologies and startups in the mobility and transport area. So there's a lot of exciting things there. I very much encourage people to look at the details of the work program, and we'll be having the program managers presenting themselves, their visions, their ideas, what they're looking for in some specific info days on the challenges.
Fantastic, Guy. Thank you for the insight. And this brings us to the end of our podcast episode. To anyone wanting to find out more, you can check out the work programme on the EIC website. Thank you very much to Keith for joining us here today. And to our audience, thank you for listening.